Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Wisdom Wednesday. I am your host, Jeffrey Smith, here as usual, coming from Pure Bowling in Ephrata, PA, and I'm pretty excited to, you know, continue the Wisdom Wednesday segments and give a topic I felt was critically important as a follow-up to 2 weeks ago when we talked a lot about lane transition. So, one of the most important things I think that needs to come after understanding lane transition is to understanding how you may be able to attack the lanes when you go into a league setting, tournament play, what may be happening in front of you. And it's a continuation to just kind of understand why the lanes are changing, what they're doing, and or what the lane is calling from. So there is a multitude of different types of abrasives that are on the market. There are multiple carriers and multiple manufacturers that create pads, some even more specific to bowling. But a lot of the things we use are, automotive paint. You see a lot in auto painting, refinishing of items. So we're using a lot of common items that are used in other industries as well. There's a couple companies that kind of have jumped in and tried to make pads that are more completely suitable for just bowling, but the characteristics are generally the same. Um, just like any one of the segments that I do here, they go, a lot better when we get interaction from you, the viewers out there in Facebook land or YouTube or wherever you're tuning in from. So as we're going through this, and I'm starting to make an explanation of what I think is important for you to know and to educate yourself on, is to get those questions firing through, so I can answer and make sure that you're understanding the information that I'm giving, and making sure I'm being a good teacher, if you will. So you know, I thought about this a lot during the day, and it's like, where do you start a segment of this magnitude? Because there is so much information out there. There's so many different types of materials that are used. But I think what I wanted to do, and I kind of landed on, is to first to kind of introduce different types of pads, different types of abrasives that are out there, and then kind of from there, kind of to make sure people get a baseline before I get in anything that's super technical on it. Okay, so for individuals like myself that have bowled for years, okay, when I was growing up, and this is pre-resin days, and most of the centers we were in were wood. Uh, we didn't do a lot when it came to kind of surface prep of a bowling ball or things along those lines. Every once in a while we go in and get a bowling ball resurfaced, and one of the things when they resurface bowling balls, the common theme is kind of your traditional sandpaper, if you will, right? This one here I have in front of me is just a 600 grit sandpaper. This is something you can go into Home Depot, Lowe's, or mom and pop's hardware store and grab off the shelf. Some would refer to it as a COTS item. I can just go in there and pick it up. The other ones that were really prevalent back in the day, and they still come into use, is you'd see guys in the league play coming up, and they would have different types of Scotch Brite. Okay, Scotch Brite still has a time and a place, but I mean here, I'm kind of giving you a fan out effect here. Scotch Brite, comes in different grits. Okay, and I got a couple pieces here just to kind of show, like, going from a white, which is a much, smoother grit, all the way down to this tan, which is very, very abrasive. It's probably somewhere around a 40 or 80 grit. Okay. These were prevalent. These were in individuals' bags. So, like back in the days of, let's say, purple hammers, blue hammers, pink hammers, anything like that back in the day, you would see gentlemen going after them if they wanted to keep them a little on the dollar side. A lot of times, the real prevalent one was either the green or the burgundy. These were kind of the staples in a person's bowling bag that were used. Okay. Again, these were used on urethane bowling balls. Okay. Now, just like anything else, the game and the material that the bowling balls are made out of have drastically changed through the years. All right. So what we used on urethane based bowling balls versus what we use on today's high end, resin bowling balls are completely different. And there's a multitude of different things that can be used at that. So we'll see guys. Maybe it's in league play. Seldom you'll get out into tournament play, or you're in a pro shop, and you'll start seeing different versions of what is referred to as an Abralon pad. Okay, now, is every Abralon pad identical? Absolutely not. Okay, they make, there's different types of textures from one, 1,000 pad to another. For instance, you may have one, the name brand Merca that's on this one. You may have heard of Sayer pads, slightly different in the texture. I know the Joss pads are different. And really, when it comes to these type of pads, basically you're kind of getting what you pay for. Okay, these, I will tell you, are not cheap when it comes to buying in bulk, and the longevity of the actual Abralon pad depends on basically what you're paying for. So if you buy a $2 pad, you're not going to get a lot of wear out of it. It's very obvious that no matter what pads we're talking about here, they wear differently. Okay, some of them are they're going to wear a lot quicker than others. But I will tell you, if you're using any of these pads dry, they're going to wear out a lot faster than you are when they're wet. Okay. But I don't want to just talk about the different textures and things like that. I want to get a baseline for a starting point so everybody understands one huge thing that you need to do to protect your bowling balls. Okay. So you're making a very large investment when you essentially, buy a bowling ball, and you want to preserve that for as long as possible. So let's say you've bought a new hammer ball, or another brand's ball, and you bought a high-end, high-performance bowling ball, okay? And maybe it's something like the Obsession, that releases tomorrow, or Redemption, or something that's of a solid cover stock. What you don't want to do is you don't want to be using any of these pads, okay? Sandpaper, you don't want to be using any type of these Scotch-Brite pads on that bowling ball, okay? What you're going to do, even though if they say, well, the equivalent of this burgundy Scotch-Brite pad is 800 grit Abralon. We'll see a conversion chart sometimes, right? Guess what? This is not designed to properly prep the surface of that high-performance ball. If you take a high-performance bowling ball, a resin cover stock, and you were to put that underneath a microscope, and you would blow up and kind of look at the bowling ball texture, what you're going to see is something that appears to be very porous, or it has peaks and valleys that are in that. All right. So when you blow it up on a microscope, it kind of looks like some teeth, if you will. All right. When you take something like a piece of standard sandpaper, all right, sandpaper is not porous. Okay. This is very flat. You got a little porosity into a Scotch-Brite pad, but both of these are essentially only going to be affecting the outer cover. Okay, so when you go and you take a high performance ball, and I got a Zenith, brand new Zenith here in front of me, Zenith Pearl. If I was to take this piece of sandpaper and I'd start sanding the outer surface of this bowling ball, I'm basically filing down the teeth only. So I'm filing down the peak, okay, which is what helps the traction and the friction between the bowling ball and the lane surface, okay? This is not meant for a reactive ball that is porous like this, that absorbs oil, all right? The reason that we use Abralon pads is because when you put this underneath a microscope, or you run water through this, is a good way of looking at it too, you'll see that water will run right through this. And this is very porous as well, and it has pliability to it. So when this is taken over the surface, this is actually going in between the peaks and the valleys and hitting all of the outer cover, and not just what I call shaving down the teeth. Okay. That's what you want to stay away from. Now, it works the opposite way. If you have a urethane based bowling ball, a true 100% urethane ball, Purple Hammer. If you're going to another company, Pitch Black, something like that. All right. You could take, if I gave you this 360 Abralon pad and I said, go hit that ball, you're going to have a really hard time making that bowling ball dull, because that bowling ball is not porous. That bowling ball does not soak in oil. It goes to the outer shell of the ball. All right. In that case, your Scotch-Brite pads or sandpaper is what's going to do the job to actually affect the surface of a urethane cover stock more than an Abralon pad is. I'm telling you right now, you are going to struggle to get an Abralon pad to do any type of work when it comes to a urethane based bowling ball. All right. So again, there's a time and a place for each one of the products. Okay. So your Scotch Brite pads, no matter what the prep is of these, whatever they come out to be, and sandpaper is much different than what you're going to do. You're going to use these on your urethane based bowling balls. And when you get into the reactive bowling balls, you're going to go into the different pads. Okay. So we got the baseline, right? And just so I feel like everybody's hearing me okay, I actually didn't see any comments come through yet. So hopefully that stuff is working. So if you're out there and you have comments so far, fire them away because I want to make sure that I'm giving proper feedback to anybody that's on the feed. So to get into detail of why these are so prevalent and why abrasives are such a big part of the game, these are arguably more important now than ever. Okay. And the reason I say that is that we all know that, USBC had made a decision and taken away weight holes. All right. So, weight holes, if you had a good ball driller, can be used to kind of redefine ball motion, and we would control front to back movements, left to right, things along those lines. But now we basically get one shot at it, and the game itself has kind of changed and evolved a little bit. All right. So right now, when I grew up, and we talked about this with a bunch of people. When I grew up, the friction always seemed to be on the lane. Okay. Now the friction's in her hands. Okay. And it's crazy, right? Because the bowling ball that you're throwing is what's coming in contact with the lane surface. So the more that I alter the surface of the ball that comes into contact with the lane where the invisible oil is going to have the biggest impact on what that ball is going to do, how it's going to read the front to back movements, and left to right. All right. It is a huge part of the game. Now, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, one of my biggest pet peeves that I see of any player is, and my staff would tell you that I kind of preach this, but there's nothing worse to me than when I say, oh yeah, Jeff, I'm going and I'm bowling on this pattern. Okay, it's 45 feet and it's 29 mils, and we walk into the bowling center, or even worse, they come into the bowling center, they open up their bags, and every single one of their balls is at 360 or 500 grit. It looks like a piece of charcoal. All right. They didn't even throw a bowling ball down the lane. Okay. Nobody's thrown a bowling ball down the lane. And we've all seen this, right? You got the guy that's over there. He's in his bag. He pulls out his first ball. He hasn't good. He starts talking about the pattern. He gets his 360, and he's crowbarring this thing, right? He's chalking this thing up. Now, I'm going to make this thing hook. All right. I'm going to make this thing hook. There's going to be a ton of oil in the lanes. I got to get my bowling ball to hook. Okay. Stop. All right. That's not something you want to do. All right. And I'm going to tell you why that's so important, right? Okay. There's so many anomalies. We talked about lane patterns, things like that before. Until you throw a bowling ball down the lane is going to tell you what it wants. Okay. The lane is going to dictate what surface prep you need to put your bowling ball at. All right. Not that sheet of paper that told you what it's supposed to play like. Okay. There's too many anomalies that go into it to go in there with a preconceived notion that you have to have the perfect surface prep when you walk in the door, or you're going to be behind the eight ball. So I'm going to give you a couple tips that I think is really important when it comes to abrasives and having the right surface preps and things when you go into a tournament. Now, here is a big one for you, okay? You always want to go into tournament play, league play, or anything you can think of in a tournament having a smoother surface on the bowling ball than what you would ever think you're going to need. And so what I'm saying to that is, you're not going to go in there and every ball in your bag is going to be at 1,000 or 2,000. If you're going to go to a tournament, let's say I'm going to travel to Vegas, okay? And I want to prepare to go out to Las Vegas, or I'm going to prepare to go out to nationals, okay, before, I can watch or anything like that. I'm going to actually go with a much higher number on my Abralon pads for my surface prep of the balls. And you can say, okay, well, why are you doing that? And the reason that we do that is that it is a lot easier to take the surface of a bowling ball down to a lower number than it is to try to bring it up by hand to higher numbers. Okay. So it's, again, it's way easier if that ball is closer. I'm not saying polished or anything like that, but it, has a sheen to it, to then take it down slowly based on when you threw it. And then the lane is telling you, hey, that's too smooth. You need to bring the numbers down. Okay. Because remember, every time on these pads, let's say you have a 4,000, a 3,000, 2,000, 1,500. All right. Every time you go and you lower the number, all right, that does not mean the bowling ball is going to quote unquote hook more. Okay. What it really is doing is it's actually changing the pattern length and trying to bring the pattern towards you at the foul line. Okay. So the lower that I start to go on the numbers of these, the quicker it's going to want to try to tell the bowling ball to get out of the skid phase and get traction and get into the hook phase. So you're essentially bringing your phases closer to you. Okay. It still has the skid. It's got a hook. It's got a roll. I don't care if you have it at 20 grit. I don't care if you use the floor sander on the bowling ball. It's still going to skid to an extent, and it's going to skid, it's going to hook, it's going to roll. All right. They're critical, right? Because these and the friction that you have in your hand are now what is helping to control some of your pin carry, right? If you have a ball that's essentially too shiny or lane shined or things along that, and you start your match and you're coming in behind the head pin, you're leaving wrap tens or your angles are too steep, going through the pins, your carry percentage is going to go way down. All right. What you really want to do is you want to err at the beginning of your block on the side of having too much surface. All right. Because remember, when you throw bowling balls down that lane with the invisible oil or the puddle that's out there, your bowling ball, as soon as it hits the lanes the first time, is already starting to go up in terms of grit numbers. All right. If you started a match and you were throwing a ball with 500 fresh, a brand new pad, I hit it hard. By the time you throw 6 or 7 shots, that bowling ball is not nearly 500 anymore. All right. You could get through a match with a ball that started at 1,000 and be 3,000 grit by the end of it, depending on what you're bowling on. All right. Because remember, the balls we're throwing, as dynamic as they are, with the absorption of oil and how they go in, they are actually smoothing out as you throw them more and more because they are soaking oil into the cover stock. And as it soaks in, the surface of your bowling ball that's coming into contact with the lane is starting to lane shine. All right. So great. I got a game plan. I've slightly higher surfaces of my bowling balls when I went to the tournament. I get there and I have a practice day. And I know I've talked about this before. I have a practice day. We're bowling. I'm not bowling for score. And I would also tell you on a practice day that I don't do a lot of surface changes on a ball to try and make it strike because when you go into there for the next block that the lane condition is still going to be even different. Okay, so you're not getting the full tell on what the lane wants from you. So you got to be cognizant of that. Now, if you have a bowling ball that's just way off and it's never going to be in play, by all means, you can bring it down a little bit, but you're not going after these bowling balls and trying to make perfect adjustments to the surface when you're not bowling for score. All right. You're making those adjustments when you're preparing to bowl for score and thinking not only about the ball that's in your hand, but you need to be thinking forward. And forward thinking is huge. I talked about this on the segment when I came back from the Players Championship, and understanding the people in front of you, understanding how late into a block you're going to go and what ball's in your hand, because you're not only thinking about the surface prep of the bowling ball you're using now, you need to be thinking about how this pattern's going to morph and it's going to break down and it's going to change. Okay. If I am on this ball and this ball runs out of gas and I want to make a change to another ball and the surface of that bowling ball is so different, sometimes that could be right, but sometimes that surface needs to be close so that the progression that I'm making is minor. Okay. And I'm not going for something that I had at 500. And then all of a sudden, the only thing else that I have in my bag is something that has either compound on it or it's, way higher surface grit numbers. So you got to be smart about it. Um, you know, you need to use surface as a tool. Okay, the surface of the bowling ball is a tool, just like having multiple balls in the bag, and you need to really work with that and understand what matches your eye the best. Um, and remember, folks, at the end of the day, what you're trying to do with the pad and with the ball in your hand is making sure that at the end of the pattern, when the ball exits the hook phase and is rolling forward, that's where you need your front to back movements to be, because the bowling ball is still trying to be still in the hook phase at the end of the pattern length. Let's say the pattern length is 40 feet and that bowling ball is still trying to hook instead of rolling forward. You're not going to bowl good. All right. That bowling ball is going too long, and it's going to make that thing you've heard people say all the time, over under. All right. It's going to make you feel like you're bowling in a phone book. Whether you're bowling on 33 feet or 52 feet, the bowling ball at the end of the pattern needs to be rolling forward. It can't still be trying to hook. If you have that, you have the wrong bowling ball and the wrong surface prep in your bag. Now, this is not easy, okay, by any means to master right off the bat. But this is a tool. These are just as important as anything in your bag. If you are a tournament player, or you're a player that bowls, three games a week in league, these are items that you should have in your bag. Okay. And if you're at a pro shops stock these, and you should be able to go in there and buy them and understand what you're doing to freshen up your ball. If you like your bowling ball at the box finish, if you will, of how it came, it's one thing to clean it and use a good cleaner, like Black Magic is a favorite of mine, and the Rejuvenator. Um, you can get into other ones like Tack Up and things like that. Great. Cleaning the bowling ball is going to help prolong it, but you also need to try and keep the cover close to what you had when you bought it, right? It's not just waiting until it needs resurfaced, because by that time, that bowling ball is already so smoothed over. And if you're not getting after the cover at all, you're going to start to lose performance pretty quickly in the bowling ball you invested a lot of dollars in. Okay. So yeah, we're going to clean, but we're also going to touch up that surface. Okay. Do you need to do it every 3 games? No, you don't have to do it every 3 games. But you can see when your bowling ball seems like it is running out of steam a little bit. And I think I see this a lot in league, because you'll go into a league and the poor lane man, you got to feel sometimes. Um, you'll have a couple weeks and somebody will bowl really good, and 2-3 weeks later, they're like, why is the lane changing? Okay. Well, is the lane really changing that much, or is it the fact that your bowling ball hasn't been cleaned, or you haven't freshened up the surface of that bowling ball in the last 30 games? Okay. A lot of times that has more to do with it than anything. If I have a really good look with a bowling ball in a building, I'm going to try to keep that surface prep pretty close each week that I go in there, even if I'm just touching it lightly. So if I gave you an example, if you had a Web Tour hybrid, which is, I believe, 1500, I'm gonna get a pad, and I'm gonna keep that surface prep at 1500. Yeah, I might do it every 3 games, maybe every 6, to keep it close to what the box finish was, because I am trying to maintain that ball shape and the performance of that bowling ball for its intention. If you don't keep after them and you don't use the surface prep on this, it doesn't matter what the lane man does out there. It's not always that they change something in the building. So there's a big news flash. Okay. It's not always about shooting the lane man. All right. It has a lot to do with what we can do ourselves to actually have the best chance. And I'm going to scroll up here. I know there's a lot of comments coming through now, so I want to make sure I don't miss any of those. Gentle Giants on 360 grit on a Grizz is butter. Yes, Jordan. I mean, that bowling ball is older than you, but I know you love it. What else we got on? Rocky, good to see you, my man. The Zenith Pearl is definitely pretty. I cannot wait to throw it. I still did not get holes in mine. Shop's just a little too crazy. Jordan, would it be okay to keep your urethane at a lower grit? Absolutely, Jordan. I can tell you, urethane bowling balls, they are designed to hook, essentially read the front of the lane and then control it, right? I mean, they're trying to hook up as soon as it hits the lane. they're not made to go long and, use the back end of the lane's friction to hook, right? Urethane balls are used for a reason. It's to kind of, I don't want to say hook stop, but it is to essentially, control the lane a little bit more. And I got to watch my battery here. Sorry about that, folks. And control the lane. So yeah, you want to keep those um, very clean and your surface prepped on those at all times. And just like anything else, the more surface or the lower number that you put on that Jordan, the earlier that ball is going to burn off its energy. It's going to get out of the skid and the hook phase and it's going to roll forward. That's what you're doing. You're controlling the phases of the bowling balls. Mark Walters. So if I use the ball for a couple of our matches and tournaments, would you recommend using a pad to get the ball closer out of block finish? Yeah, we just kind of went over that. So yeah, I think you probably asked that as I was talking about it. But absolutely, if I like a ball at 1,000 grit or 1,500, I'm essentially going to try to keep after that ball and keep it close to those numbers to get the maximum performance out of that bowling ball. If not, again, that bowling ball is going to lose pop through the pins, right? So if a ball seems awesome and you're just like, it's starting to stall out a little bit, guess what? It probably needs freshened up, and a cleaning isn't going to do it all, right? You need to if you clean it, you're getting the outer cover clean, but you're not reducing that grit. And I mean, there's just cleaners out there that have like a clean and buff or a clean and dull and things like that have some additives in it that will actually change the surface texture of the bowling ball a little bit. But the Aberlon's going to do a much better job on that. Can you review what you do with balls that come with factory polish? I mean, on that one, Jason, I mean, everybody's kind of different. It depends on the player. I mean, for me, myself, I don't use a lot of compound or polish. Essentially, what I do is pretty much any ball, even this beautiful Zenith Pearl that I have in front of me, believe it or not, is 500, and it has right on top of it is compound and polish. I'm probably going to get the polish right off of that. I'll probably settle in on something else just because, just rev rate and speed and the way it matches and the way I like to see a bowling ball. I don't like a lot of polish or anything like that on a ball. So, but for somebody that's got slower ball speed or needs a little help through the pins when it sees friction, factory polish and stuff could be, very, very applicable for them because the factory polish is going to stand up and change direction harder off the friction that's actually on the lane. So it's different for each player. But for me, I pretty much hit a ball every time I get it. Brandon, a sanded ball at 1,000 or 1,500 usually gets to about 3,500 after 14 or 15 games. You should adjust then. Full resurface should be done around 30 games. Yes. And I think you probably answered Colin's question, which was, how many times can you resurface a ball before it's dead? There's definitely such a thing as a dead ball. Okay. It's just like anything else. I mean, you're dealing with an outer cover, you're dealing with oil absorption. If you keep, if you detox bowling balls and keep the oil extracted out of them as long as possible, and you keep up with the cleaning and, slight, surface changes and keeping them freshened up, bowling balls will last you a good long time. But yeah, there's absolutely dead balls. I mean, if you throw a cover, it's got 1,000 a game. But you know what? Some of those become your favorite balls because you are so prone and used to how that bowling ball rolls that it becomes a control piece in your bag. So maybe at one point it was a bigger ball in the bag, and it just becomes now a control piece that is like old reliable. I mean, for me, I had affinities in my bag and vibes and stuff like that I had thousands of games on. And it was just those balls, you just knew the ball. Frankie B, what do you do? I use 360 Aberlon pad on my original Pitbull and it skids out and I can't carry for shit. There's a lot of oil in Millsboro, Maryland. Well, what you're seeing there, Frankie, is it's not really skidding out. What it is, it's actually reading the front of the lane hard. So when you have that much surface on a bowling ball, that bowling ball is going to try to dig into the front part of the lane. It's going to get out of the skid phase quick. It's going to get into hook phase quick, but also it's going to roll forward. And when it rolls forward and then it gets down lane to where the dry portion of the lane is, that bowling ball was going to puke. Okay. So what I would recommend on something like that, if you feel like you're trying to get more reaction down lane, going with a lower number Aberlon pad is not the answer. Okay. I would actually, if you want some teeth and projection, and I'll talk about this as well, I would recommend you use something like 500 on as the first pass. And then you jump up into something like all the way up to a 3,000 pad, which is going to give you projection, but it's also going to give you the teeth underneath that you're looking for. Terry, what pad would you use to keep the WebMB at box finish? Well, the WebMB at box finish is not. You're not going to be able to do that just with a pad. If you're truly trying to get box finish on an MB, Terry, um, you're going to have some compound. You're going to have some polish there as well if you're trying to have box finish. Now, you can get a ball pretty shiny with just pads. So if you invest and you get into 4,000 or 5,000 Abralon, you're going to see something that appears to be shiny that doesn't even have compound or polish on it. And again, for myself, that I don't like to try to replicate a factory finish because it's very hard to do. Remember, when you're getting a factory finish on a bowling ball and it's coming down the line and they're finishing it up, um, you're getting that ball is spinning at an incredible rate. And then it is, puts the polish and everything on top of it. It's hard to replicate because these balls are coming off. So as their pads wear in the production line, they get, different types of finishes towards the end. Okay. So yeah, they might be 2000, but these things wear out, right? So even on the production lines, you're using something similar, they get changed out every so often. So not every ball that comes off of the line is identical. So that's why a lot of times we will go and we'll kind of hit a ball when we first get it. Because if I use a brand new pad and I hit a bowling ball, I know what I started with, right? I know what I started with because I used it and I did it myself. It's very hard to replicate a factory finish. So again, what I was getting at there, Terry, is I will tend to essentially use, 3, 4, 5,000 Abralon instead to bring it up and give it a sheen without using actual compounds or polishes, which I'm going to have to do on a spinner. All right. Robert, hope you're doing well, my friend. What's a better method? Using a pad with water, then cleaning after, or putting cleaner directly on the pad? I would tend, honestly, to do that with water on the pad first and then clean it afterwards. Just because when you're mixing the two, I'd rather get the surface to where I want it, Robert. And then what I'll do with the cleaner, because it's going to add a little bit of tackiness to it, it's also going to get rid of some of that residue that comes off from the pad. Because once you start using water and stuff on a pad, you're going to get a lot of dust. A lot of us will use the abrasive side. We'll flip the pad over, we'll use the backside to get the worst of it off. But then I tend to clean it afterwards because then I get the kind of tackiness from a lot of the products that are on the market. Let's see. Ryan Snyder, you said to use Scotch Brite on urethane and Abralon on reactive. What about the urethane plus microcell equipment? It's a blended thing there, Ryan. Those I can tell you can use an Abralon pad. They are essentially a much softer material when you feel them. I don't know what they are in a durometer, but an Abralon pad will cut it. Okay, that's definitely a way of doing it. I got a sad face from Willie Simpson. I don't know what that's about, but it popped up and I saw it. So sorry, Willie, if I let you down. Did I miss one of your comments or something? Let me make sure I didn't miss somebody up here. I don't think I did, though, unless it didn't come through. Willie, if you left a comment, I ain't seeing it. But Ryan, yeah, I would use that. So the other one, and this is an important one, and I'm watching my battery life here. I apologize. I've been on my laptop a lot today, but I don't want to lose my feed here. We still got about 15 minutes. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about spinners, okay? And again, this is really important, gang, all right? I know a lot of you out there, and if you're on the feed or you're a competitive bowler and may have your own personal spinners, okay? That's great, all right? But what I'm going to tell you right now is you want to be using a spinner as little as possible when you're dealing with an Abralon pad, okay? Because you're absolutely destroying the cover stock, all right? When they're spinning at a high rate like that, a spinner should really be used when you're resurfacing a bowling ball or you're prepping an area of maybe some plug work or something. But it should not be used. You shouldn't be going and putting your ball on the spinner at all times with these Abralon pads to make these adjustments, okay? It's very hard on the bowling ball. You will reduce the longevity of a bowling ball by using that high-speed spinner, all right? Make these surface adjustments with your hand, okay? Unless you're trying to bring a ball up, as we discussed, then by all means, take the ball, put it on a spinner, because what you're doing there anyway is you're essentially smoothing it out, all right? You don't want to use that spinner to say, let's say a ball is 1,000 and to crank on there and put 1,000 on a bowling ball. Do it by hand. It's a lot safer. It will prolong the actual cover stock of the bowling ball. And you won't be tearing through pads as much either. Okay. These pads can be used obviously wet or dry. Um, I prefer to use these if I'm doing a surface adjustment or touching up a ball. I prefer to use them dry by hand lightly. Obviously, when I'm on a spinner, because it's spinning so fast, I'm using them wet. But you really have to understand just how much you're digging into a ball, especially if you're using something really abrasive like a 360 pad with water on it and you're going after a cover. You are tearing the crap out of that cover. All right. Use the spinner sparingly. When you're using these products, okay, you want to make sure you're doing the majority of your stuff by hand. Okay. So when I crack and I get a ball and I get it out of the box and I say I'm prepping it to put it on the press, I'm hitting it by hand. I'm not doing it on a spinner. You will not see me do that on a spinner. Will I clean a ball on a spinner? Yes, I will use a ball cleaner and a microfiber towel and clean, but you're not going to see me making surface adjustments on my spinner. All right. Terry, I'll try to hit the WebMB with 4,000 new to pad use. Yes, I think that's a good rate to go with that. Now, Terry, if that's not enough for you, by all means, if you really want to try and get there, you're going to need to get some factory compound. And if you're trying to get the same thing, not everybody's compound for the companies is the same. You can go in and get compounds from a paint or a detail store or something like that. You just got to watch what you're buying because and how they effectively match up with the cover stock of a bowling ball. There's a ton of products that are on the market. But just make sure that you're trying to use things that are really meant for bowling more or not, because the additives and the things that are putting in there are kind of designed to go along with the polymers that are in a bowling ball. All right. Colin, is there a proper motion when using an Abralon pad? Like I do mine with small circles all the way around. Is there a better way? No, that's perfectly fine, Colin. If I was to say what you shouldn't be doing is you shouldn't be just rubbing back and forth like this. You want to do circular motions in the ball. Spin it around in your hand. USBC has a rule that you got to hit the whole bowling ball. Really, the most important part is to make sure you hit those back flare rings. That's the portion of the bowling ball it's going to have the most impact. You want to make sure that you're doing a good job. I mean, between your gripping holes and stuff like that, it doesn't really matter that much. But make sure you're hitting where the ball is coming into contact with the lane is the most important, and especially on the bottom side of the ball is what I'm talking about, where the back flare rings are. Yeah, and Brandon just said a good one there. Don't use car wax; it'll clog the pores. And exactly what I'm saying. You got to watch what you're using product wise. Now, if you're trying to make a bowling ball go dead straight, go ahead and use turtle wax. You'll those pores will be completely smooth, and you might as well have a polyester ball. So again, you can really do some damage to a bowling ball pretty quickly if you're using the wrong products on it. So I do recommend to use cleaners, polishes, and things like that are meant for bowling balls, and not just off the shelf items you get because you saw something was cheap at the Dollar General. Again, watch what you pay for, right? So again, when you're using the pads, one of the other things that I think is important is to understand, as you bring it towards you. Now, I'm going to tell you, most players, okay, if you're in league play, or you're bowling something out on, a local tournament, even on tour, right? We really generally don't go under 500 grit very often, unless we're using on what we'll call a burn ball. Okay. And a burn ball, by that, I mean, that ball has no chance of ever coming into play. And we're using it during the first, our practice to try to burn a hole in a lane with no intention of ever using that ball in play. Okay. That happens. All right. I talked about, we did it at the Players Championship together with me and Machuga, and we made our first pair amazing. Right. Sometimes you gotta know where you can use that to set yourself up. Got a longer one here. Mark, please cover how each number is subjective to the bowler. Too many bowlers think that everyone with every style sees the same results with the same grits. Too many people will hear a ball's at 1,000. Think that's a lot of surface, yet they have 250 rev rate, 17 degrees of tilt, and 18 miles. And yeah, covered that a little bit earlier, Mark, but kind of the same thing I was talking about with, like myself versus, a person with a slower ball speed. When you're dealing with the surface prep of a bowling ball, it really comes down to your style, right? Somebody that has no problem getting the bowling ball through the front part of the lane, probably is not ever going to use a 4,000 pad or a 3,000 pad, right? Because their ball doesn't see the front part of the lane. Somebody that has a very high degree of tilt, okay, or spinny, right? They're not your player that's going to be using a ton of polish or anything, because their bowling ball is never going to get into the hook phase if they do that, right? It's going to stay in a skid phase forever. It's about really understanding, and I think this is where it's important to work with myself or another reputable pro shop or a guy or a coach or somebody that to kind of help you understand where you want your bowling ball to be seen. And it changes depending on the pattern you're bowling on, the pattern length, right? The pattern length dictates so much about which one of these pads I'm going to use, whether it's 500,000, 1,500, 2,000, 3,000. Again, it goes back to, for your style, for you, the person, where you need that bowling ball to actually be coming out of the hook phase and be rolling forward. That is the golden number you need to be using. And you're right, Mark. It's not the same for every single player, because, for me, I may like 1,000 grit on my ball, but for somebody that, struggles to get it through the front of the lane, they may like it, something along the 2 to 3,000 range, maybe the sweet spot for them. Just like on a drilling angle, or when you're working with your pro shop on proper drilling for you too, it all comes into play. And that's why it's so hard to do, a segment that is just like, this is what you do when this happens, because it's different for every player, because there's so many different anomalies. But what we can do is we can truly understand exactly what we're doing. If we all understand that the lower the number goes in the pad, the closer I'm going to bring that ball motion to the foul line. That's a starting point, right? And that if we all know what bowling balls and what textures and pads and Scotch Brights and sandpapers or screens, for that matter, the things that it should be used on, that's going to take us as a good first step. I think what would be a good one too, and I'll try to shoot a video on this. Maybe I'll get the my buddy the Gentle Giant in here, and we'll try to shoot a video together. We thought I can do it with a board box and stuff like that, but we could take a bowling ball on purpose. And I think it would be a pretty cool segment for us to take a ball, and we'll change the surface on it, and we'll mark off where you can see that bowling ball changing the phases. So, putting a piece of tape on my access point, throw it down the lane at a surface, it'll be able to show you on the clip where it's reading the lane, where it's coming out of that skid phase. So you can actually physically see it on a segment. So it really makes sense, because we all learn in different ways, right? Right now, I'm trying to teach you by speaking. All right. And as a teacher and as a coach, it's my job to adapt to the person's style. So somebody may need to see what I'm talking about. So I think it'd be a really good segment for us to go on and do an online instructional thing, for maybe it's a short little, 5-minute video that will show you exactly what we're talking about and the effects it has when we hit these bowling balls. I think it'd be a pretty cool segment to do. And it looks like, I know, the Gentle Giant's on Ashley's account right now. That's actually Jason responding saying, let's do it. I think it's a good one for us to do. Colin, when I was 16, I used Safety Sullivan on a Roto Grip Rogue Cell, and it made the colors drag across the ball. Don't think it made a difference of how I was bowling back then, but it did make it shine. Yes, it's I think we've all seen that. Some of my favorite ones I've ever seen in the shop are the people that bake their bowling balls at home. I have seen everything you could dream of come through my door, and shook my head and said, I can't help you. I mean, you burned your bowling ball to a crisp. There's not much I can do with it, right? I've seen, bowling balls come in that look like somebody ran it across a cheese grater because they were trying to get, traction. So, but yeah, it's crazy. I think it's a good segment and a good starting point for that, that it would kind of go into having a really good video. And I think that's something we'll move forward with and try to offer for you here. But again, these segments are meant to just try to get the juices going in your mind and understanding a little more, to give you a better baseline for, refining your game, continuing to work on yourself, understanding your bowling balls, understand your ball motion, understand all the anomalies that come in with how this game works. And I think it'll make us all better players. So I'm going to take one or two more comments here, and then I'm going to wrap it up for the night, folks, since we're at that 45-minute mark. And I think it was a really good segment. I loved all the questions that are coming in. So, Frankie, let me try to answer you here. Should I start with 1,000 Abralon pad to start on my gold angle, and everybody complaining me using urethane? Well, again, going back to it, Frankie, don't use Abralon on that gold angle. Make sure you're using a Scotch Brite or some sandpaper, because that's definitely a urethane ball. That's a relic. Um, I don't know. Everybody yelling at you using urethane. Urethane's got a time and a place, my man. It is not in league. Okay. If it's in league and you were bowling with me, I'd probably give you crap too, because we're bowling as a team, not as a single sport. So, can you use your air fryer or pellet grill? Mark, I will write instructions for you. You can use your air fryer to cook me chicken wings, and you can use your pellet grill to keep me warm while I'm eating my wings. Jeremiah, we're located in Ephrata, Pennsylvania, so Lancaster County, PA. We do a ton of. If you're on here and you're kind of looking around, you're not local. I mean, we do tons of videos, educational stuff on here. We do a lot of talk about it, technical things. We do a lot of we'll throw balls, do a lot of testing here, and there's just a wealth of knowledge that we love to share with everybody. So hopefully, if this is your first time in, hopefully you're enjoying it. And by all means, if you are on here, folks, this is one of your first times that you're on, go over and go to our YouTube channel. It is the place you can find all of our, essentially every video we've ever done on our YouTube channel. Just go to the Pure Bowling channel on YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. I mean, exponentially, we've been growing faster and faster, and it's growing. So it's a really fun thing. But yeah, by all means, Jeremiah, come in. If you're not too far from us, I mean, we get people that come in from you know states and states away to come in and kind of see the difference. We have here in Ephrata, PA, we have a full training center here, 8 lanes in my building here, and about a 2,000 square foot pro shop. So we are literally a one-stop shop here, and just trying to make each player better, one person at a time, man. So Todd Benner will never be on this. Todd Benner, you don't have to worry about us being teammates at Berks, because I can't do it. Nothing against anybody that bowls at Berks, but I'm just not going to bowl league there. It's just not going to happen. I don't want to get my ego inflated by averaging 240 in that building. But anyway, gang, again, I'm going to wrap it up here for the night. I'm going to end just the way I do everything else, right? We're trying to get this pandemic behind us. Bowling has pretty much reopened in most areas. California's starting to slowly reopen. But continue to go and support your local bowling centers, proprietors, your local pro shops. By all means, come and see me here. We are extremely, extremely busy in here, but I promise you, by all means, I will get to you just as fast as I can. I'm about 50 balls in the hole right now, with a release day tomorrow for all the incredible hammer releases and Deviate stuff that's coming out tomorrow. Very humbling that everybody trusts me to, essentially, service them and help them be the best version of themselves. But by all means, go support Bowling Gang. If you're in the PA or the tri-state area, be safe tomorrow. We got some more snow coming in. We're used to it, but another 6 to 10 on top of what we got. But we will be back in here in the shop on Friday and on Saturday morning. And until then, if you have any other questions at any time, don't ever hesitate to reach out to me directly. You can catch me on Facebook, whether you get a hold of me on my personal page or through the pro shop. Or if you want to go on to purebowling.com, leave us an email, comments there, and we'll get back to you. So again, hopefully everybody enjoyed this segment. I sure as heck enjoyed this one, and hopefully it helped everybody. And I'll talk to everybody soon. Stay safe out there. Bye now.